What if everything you thought you knew about one of America's biggest political scandals was built on evidence so solid that even the accused's own allies became witnesses against him? Today, we're diving into newly released testimony that reveals exactly how prosecutors built their case and why they believed they had him dead to right. Special counsel Jack Smith recently sat down for a full video deposition with Congress, and the details are now public. This testimony gives us a rare look inside how federal prosecutors approached one of the most controversial cases in modern American history, the investigation into Donald Trump's actions after the 2020 election. Let's start with the biggest question. Was Trump just exercising his First Amendment right to question the election results? According to Smith, there's a crucial difference. Anyone can claim an election was rigged or say they won when they didn't. That's protected speech. But when someone uses those claims to interfere with the actual legal process of counting votes and transferring power, it crosses into criminal territory. Smith explained that fraud isn't protected by the First Amendment, no matter who's speaking. The key issue wasn't just what Trump said, it was what he allegedly did with those statements. Smith made it clear this case was different from past disputed elections. Yes, candidates have complained about losing before. But according to the prosecution, Trump went beyond complaining. They believed he organized a specific plan to use false claims about fraud to disrupt the official certification of election results. That's what made this unprecedented. One of the most important parts of the testimony dealt with political pressure. Smith was asked directly, did Attorney General Garland push you to go after Trump? Did President Biden tell you to bring charges? Did anyone from the White House interfere? His answer to all these questions was a simple no. He said the decision to prosecute was based entirely on evidence and law. He consulted with experienced prosecutors on his team, but the final call was his. Smith added that if anyone had tried to pressure him improperly, he wouldn't have stood for it, and neither would his team. This stands in sharp contrast to concerns people now have about political influence over prosecutions. Smith's testimony emphasized independence, prosecutors making decisions based on facts, not political orders. There was an interesting moment when Smith's lawyer explained that the Department of Justice had sent an email just an hour before the testimony forbidding Smith from discussing the classified documents case. That's the second investigation, where Trump was accused of keeping highly sensitive national security documents at his Florida resort after leaving office. A federal judge has blocked the release of that part of Smith's report, so he couldn't talk about it, even though he clearly wanted to. This frustrated the congressional questioners because they had many questions about that case too. Smith described the foundation of the election case. He said the evidence was particularly strong because the witnesses weren't Trump's political enemies. They were his allies. People who voted for Trump, campaigned for him, and wanted him to win were the ones who came forward to testify. Republican state officials from Arizona, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. A former congressman who was supposed to be a Trump elector. These weren't Democrats with an axe to grind. These were fellow Republicans who told investigators that what they witnessed crossed legal and ethical lines. One even called it an attempt to overthrow the government. Smith explained that Trump had a pattern. Whenever he received information suggesting he lost the election, he rejected it. Whenever someone presented a theory, no matter how far-fetched, suggesting he could stay in power, he embraced it. Trump surrounded himself with people who would tell him what he wanted to hear, rather than experts who understood election law. The testimony revealed something important about January 6th itself. Smith's team collected phone records showing when calls were made and how long they lasted. They didn't tap anyone's phones or listen to conversations. They just wanted to know who was calling whom and when. This became crucial evidence because it showed that during the violence at the Capitol, Trump was getting calls from people he trusted. Republican senators, advisors, allies, and still refused to stop the attack for hours. According to prosecutors, this demonstrated criminal intent. He knew what was happening. People he relied on were begging him to act, and he didn't. Some senators later complained that their phone records were subpoenaed, claiming their phones were tapped. Smith flatly denied this. Getting phone records isn't wiretapping. It just shows that a call happened, not what was said. If Trump had called Democratic senators that day, those records would have been collected too. The investigation followed whoever Trump and his associates contacted. Smith was asked about text messages between Steve Bannon and Boris Epstein, one of Trump's lawyers. These messages revealed coordination and communication right around January 6th. Bannon had made a video prediction the day before the riot, seemingly knowing violence was coming. The evidence showed Bannon had reconnected with Trump after being out of touch, and he was actively involved during this period. On the evening of January 6th, while Trump was directing associates to call senators to delay the certification, Epstein texted Bannon asking if he was in touch with Trump. Bannon responded that he was, and that Trump was still on fire. This was happening at the same time Trump was refusing to call off the rioters. Prosecutors interviewed several of Trump's associates. Boris Epstein confirmed they were trying to call senators, but tried to downplay Trump's direct involvement, even though text messages contradicted him. Rudy Giuliani sat down for an interview too. When asked why he said he was calling fellow Republicans in one voicemail, Giuliani explained that of course he was only calling Republicans. Democrats wouldn't help with this, and even some Republicans refused. He openly admitted he expected cooperation based on party loyalty. Smith addressed the Supreme Court's immunity decision. The case initially moved through lower courts, and prosecutors won at every level. But when it reached the Supreme Court, the majority ruled that presidents have broader immunity for official acts than Smith's team had argued. Smith disagreed with this decision, but accepted it as the law. He then had to determine whether they still had a case under these new constraints. His conclusion was yes, the core evidence remained strong. State officials who put country before party, the pattern of Trump's behavior, and the fact that this was about Trump as a candidate trying to overturn an election he lost, all of that evidence was still available. The immunity ruling limited some evidence about certain actions, but Smith believed they could still prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. Why weren't Trump's co-conspirators charged? Smith explained that his office analyzed the evidence against different people. At one point, his staff determined they had enough evidence to charge certain individuals. But before Smith made final decisions, Trump won the 2024 election, which meant the special counsel's office would be shut down. The prosecutions never moved forward because of this political reality, not because the evidence was weak. When asked who should be held accountable for the investigation disrupting members of Congress, Smith had a direct answer. Donald Trump. Trump chose who to call. Trump directed his associates to contact these specific senators to delay the proceedings. If Trump had called Democrats, those phone records would have been collected instead. The responsibility for why these records were gathered lies with the choices Trump made. Smith defended his career and his team. For nearly 3 decades, he'd been a career prosecutor under both Republican and Democratic administrations. He followed department policies and legal requirements. The decision to charge Trump was his, but it was based entirely on Trump's alleged actions. Smith expressed sadness and anger that Trump has sought revenge against career prosecutors, FBI agents, and support staff who simply did their jobs. These public servants were now being vilified and fired for their work on these cases. Smith stated clearly, if asked today whether to prosecute a former president based on the same evidence, he would do it again, regardless of whether that president was Republican or Democrat. The investigation wasn't about politics. It was about following the evidence wherever it led. The testimony painted a picture of a methodical prosecution built on Republican witnesses, phone records, text messages, and interviews with people inside Trump's inner circle. Smith and his team believed they had developed proof beyond reasonable doubt that Trump engaged in a criminal scheme to overturn election results and obstruct the transfer of power. They also believed the classified documents case showed Trump willfully retained highly sensitive materials and repeatedly obstructed efforts to retrieve them. Whether you believe the prosecution was justified or politically motivated, this testimony reveals how career prosecutors approached these cases, what evidence they gathered, how they made decisions, and why they believed criminal charges were warranted. The full deposition runs much longer and contains many more details. But these highlights capture the key moments: the First Amendment question, the evidence from Republican witnesses, the phone records controversy, the January 6th timeline, the Supreme Court immunity issue, and Smith's insistence that politics played no role in his decisions. It's a window into how one of America's most consequential investigations unfolded behind closed doors.